And we're live. Well, welcome to the Bell Club podcast. I'm your host, David Bell. And on today's episode, we'll be taking a look at round three of the 2021 F1 World Championship, with this week's Grand Prix being held at the Suzuka circuit in Japan. In this series, we'll explore everything on and off the track, from the engineering masterpieces that are the cars themselves, any drama within the team. We'll be taking a look at also the history of the sport. And during each episode, we're going to take a look at a different fundamental part of the sport. For example, we'll be taking a look at like the Parc Ferme rules, kind of explaining the actual format of the races, either the original format or when the introduction of like the sprint format as well, like the different tire types, and also just generally educating ourselves about the sport. These kind of dives into the actual sport itself are more aimed at kind of newcomers to the sport, like myself. But whether you're a seasoned F1 fan or just someone who's kind of just discovered F1 for the first time, this season will deliver all the passion and hopefully deepen our understanding of the sport as we go along. Now, let's get ready for those 5 green lights and let's get underway. So, let's kick off this week's episode by breaking down the weekend into kind of easier to manage sections. But first, we'll start off with FP1 and FP2. Then we'll move on to FP3 and qualifying. Then we'll kind of wrap the episode up with kind of the learning kind of section where we'll dive into different aspects of F1 to kind of better understand how F1 works. And of course, we'll go into the race itself. So, the big story from this week was the demotion of Liam Lawson as he was kind of pushed back into VCub from actual Red Bull. Now, his tenure at the team only lasted 2 races, which was the shortest term of a driver in the team's history. Now, with that demotion, it did see the promotion of Yuki Tsunoda as Lawson's actual replacement. Now, I do have to say, it was quite harsh from Red Bull's perspective just to dump Liam after 2 races, even though the car's not exactly developed for him. It's well-known fact, it's Max's car. To be fair, kind of you can make the argument the other way, that he is supposed to be one of the best drivers in the world, and if you don't perform, you're out. It's a cutthroat industry. It's a cutthroat sport. If you're not performing, you're gone. A best example, you can ask Alex Albon, Pierre Gasly, or even the newest member of Perez, Sergio Perez, and they'll tell you how it feels to be kind of not performing the same as Max, and then you're kind of out. You get booted. Now, during FP1 and FP2, the only real issues that kind of cropped up were surprisingly, were the 4 red flags, which 2 of them were from the actual grass at the side of the track catching on fire, mainly because how low the cars are actually set up to maximize their downforce, and the titanium skid pad or skid plate was creating sparks and setting the dry grass at the side of the track on fire. Maybe not the best idea for whoever made the decision to move Japan to April instead of its normal place around October time, kind of in the winter months. The winter months, the grass is usually a lot damper. Damp grass doesn't burn, it kind of just creates smoke. But now, I do get the decision on why they moved it from around October time, or say the winter months, to April, to this weekend, was to avoid the rain and avoid the storms or basically the bad weather that Japan can get. But really, what did you really expect? Red hot sparks meeting dry, freshly cut grass. At least they could have taken some precautions instead of using fucking fire cones or traffic cones filled with water just to put out the flames, which seemed very low budget. It seems like they didn't really care what's going on. They didn't take the safety or security of the track very serious. I mean, just put a water bowser in the back of a pickup truck, attach a garden hose to it. Even that is better than filling cones full of water. But other than the serious fire hazard that the cars kind of face or pose now, the last two red flags were actually from two kind of crashes. Well, say crashes. One was a pretty big crash. Second was a meh crash. But the first one was from one of our rookies, Jack Doohan, who had a decent shunt in FP2. Then there was Fernando Alonso's when he kind of the back end kind of lost on him. He touched the grass and went skidding off into the gravel trap. So we'll dive a wee bit more into Doohan's kind of crash. So it was during FP2. He had a big shunt where it brought out the red flag, and by the looks of some of their footage from the top camera, I'm sure there's a specific name for it, that showed like the 3 or 4 dots, green dots on a steering wheel. Looks like he didn't close his DRS or the drag reduction system when trying to take the first corner of Suzuka at full throttle, which the whole point of that is to reduce the drag, give you more speed on the straights, and gives you no grip when you're going into the corners. And as we've seen from the crash, he just completely lost the back end of his car, spun out from under him, and he was out for FP3. But thankfully, his engineers and the whole mechanic team got his car built up again and ready for qualifying on Saturday. Then the final red flag of FP2, or say the FP1 and FP2 section, or well, say Friday, was from our legend Fernando Alonso, where it looked like he put a wheel on the grass at turn 8, and in doing so made him run off the road or run out of space, and he was heading straight for the gravel trap, which his car spun 180 and he got beached, which unfortunately ended the session. And especially the way Aston Martin are going at the moment with, let's say, their controversial driver lineup, he seemed to be the only one who's actually scoring them points. So he was kind of needed to get fuel plans, update their strategies to see how the car's actually going to perform this weekend. So it was unfortunate that he crashed when he did, but shit happens, and no one's perfect, even with the oldest driver and the most experienced driver on the grid and being a two-time world champion. But mistakes happen, and it's a learning day for every driver. So then within FP3, we had more of the same issues as we did as in FP1 and FP2, with 2 more red flags coming out for, as you could guess, fucking grass fires, which surprises no one. With all of the fires out on track, I would love to know how much that would have actually affected the time, or affected the teams, should I say, in terms of their ability to actually collect data in terms of the tire degradation over kind of longer runs, especially on this circuit, which I'm not mistaken, it was resurfaced, or it wasn't resurfaced. Maybe I'm talking shit, but they kind of need to know, obviously, how their tires are going to degrade over time, especially with different fuel loads and fuel plans. But that was really the only issues in FP3, other than, well, in terms of not driver issues. The really issues that came with drivers was through cut-off signs, which he ran wide at turn 6, and he took his Williams a bit of off-roading into the grass. Then we'll move on to qualifying. So the only real issue that seemed to crop up, especially in first qualifying or Q1, was with another rookie, Isaac Hadjar, which he only really seemed to be having kind of major issues with. It turns out to be his seatbelt. At the time, I think even the commentators weren't sure if it's his seat itself or his seatbelt or kind of the buckle of a seatbelt, but it looked like he was in kind of extreme pain, or if the seatbelt itself kind of came undone, which obviously having your seatbelt undone when you're going 200 miles an hour is extremely dangerous, which, of course, in a crash, the driver could be launched out of the car, and no one ever wants to see that. Then, looking at Q2, there was another red flag due to, can anyone guess? Yes, another fucking grass fire, which is definitely a thing that that race control, or even the management of the Suzuka track itself, could be on top of for next year, especially if the the gods of F1 decide to put Japan kind of early in the calendar for next year. They could easily have fire marshals or actual firefighters, fire engines, kind of at track ready in case of these issues do prop up again. Then, in terms of driver finishes in Q2, the only real interesting kind of matchup or fight between drivers were, funny enough, with Liam Lawson and Yuki, which was funny to see that Lawson actually finished higher than Yuki. I mean, it's only Q2, but still, he still finished higher than him, with Lawson finishing in 14th and Yuki in 15th. Now, yes, they both got eliminated in Q2, but it was just funny to see Liam, even though he'd just been dropped from Red Bull, for not getting past, 18th from his two races. I think that's was his highest finish in qualifying or race finish, that he beat his replacement. Then, when looking at Q3, it was actually quite a boring session. To be fair, nothing really interesting happened, nothing really dramatic happened, other than Max Verstappen, surprise, surprise, getting pole position and getting the fastest lap, which in terms of fastest laps at Suzuka was the fastest lap in the history, which he beat. What's his name? Four-time world champion, Ferrari driver, Red Bull driver. Oh my god, I've literally just gone blank. Fuck. Sebastian Vettel. There we go. Brains kicked in again. It's early in the morning. Yeah, so Max Verstappen got the fastest lap, which beat the lap record and beat. I literally forgot his name. Whatever, whoever the driver I said before, I forgot his name again, but whatever. Now, let's move on to the actual race itself. But before we do that, there looked like there was actually a bit of news before the race even started, with Carlos Sainz, actually getting a three-place grid penalty for impeding Hamilton during the qualifying session. But overall, it was really just a standard race. There was nothing really much to say about the actual race itself. It was quite a boring race. There was no real issues, no real incidences, other than just a standard kind of battle between a couple of drivers overtaking, losing positions, gaining positions. But the real kind of drama became when Max and Lando kind of came out of the pits together, which you can see in Lando's top camera that Max did kind of push him a wee bit wide, or not wide, but kind of pushed him more towards the edge of the grass, or towards the grass, and Lando had to hit the grass, run over the grass, even try and overtake Max. But while Lando tried to overtake him, you couldn't overtake off track anyway, and Max closed the door on him and just ran him out of track, and he had to take evasive maneuvers and run off track, run over the grass. Then at the end, Max himself ended up taking his first win of the season, and he actually crucially took some points away from Lando in the Drivers' Championship, and he took a few away from, well, he didn't really take much away from McLaren themselves, but he still made a little bit of a dent in denying Lando or even Oscar to finish in P1, but Lando and Oscar did finish P2 and P3 respectively. Then McLaren still are leading the constructors. They're still top of the table. Then Max himself actually moved to within 1 point behind Lando for first in the Drivers' Championship. Now, as kind of mentioned at the start of this episode, in this section we'll kind of take a look at different aspects of F1 that newcomers, kind of like myself, maybe not necessarily know, or we can kind of just learn a bit more about F1 itself. So it's fundamental to understand how race weekend is actually structured, or how the format actually works. So that's what we're kind of going to take a look at this week. So this weekend, or kind of just any weekend in general, other than sprint weekends, are set up as just a 3 day weekend or 3 day race format. That's Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, with each day itself hosting a different event within the race format. So Friday, then during Friday itself, it hosts 2 practice sessions, which are called FP1 or FP2, and the actual FP of that standing for free practice. Now, during these sessions, the teams themselves can actually fine tune their cars, test different race strategies, and test different things like tire types versus race strategies, or fuel loads versus tire degradation. Then on Saturday is the final free practice session, or FP3, which gives teams one last chance to add or change aspects of their car. Then once FP3 is finished, then there is a break of a few hours before the teams and the drivers have to get back out on track for the next session, which is qualifying itself. Then during qualifying, it determines the order of the grid, or in which position each driver will start the race the following day. Then each qualifying session is broken down, or qualifying itself is broken down into 3 stages: Q1, Q2, and Q3, with each of those sessions lasting a little bit of a shorter amount of time. For example, Q1 is 18 minutes, Q2 is 15, and Q3 is 12 minutes. Then in each of these stages, the drivers are competing against each other for the fastest time, or the fastest lap, with the 5 slowest drivers being eliminated from Q1, then another 5 in Q2. Then when it's time for Q3, there are no more eliminations, as the last 10 drivers will compete against each other once again for the actual best lap time, or the fastest lap, with the driver who sets the fastest lap being awarded with pole position, or they basically get to start from the front of the grid during the actual race the next day. Then the following day, on Sunday, it's the actual race itself, or the Grand Prix. This is where all 20 drivers will start in their respective starting positions on the grid, and they compete against each other for the win of the race. If you're usually within the top 10, you can kind of do that, other than some miraculous magic circumstances where you start from last and you win, like Perez has done, Hamilton has done. But other than the win, their drivers are hopefully fighting each other for at least some points. Then during the race, championship points themselves are awarded to the top 10 drivers, with the driver who won the race receiving the most points of 25 points, with the driver whoever finishes in 10th getting the least amount of points, which is 1 point. Then, with the start of the 2025 season, the FIA have actually gotten rid of the single point that's given to the driver who completes the fastest overall lap, which the FIA have stated it's to basically simplify the point scoring system. It's very vague, whatever the fuck that's supposed to mean, and basically to avoid any kind of controversies that have happened in the past with shenanigans with the team sacrificing the number 2 driver so he can steal a point off the other team, so their main driver wins the championship. It's old cat and mouse games. It's called the Piranha Club for a reason in the paddock. So it's always a cutthroat industry. If they can, they'll steal everything off their enemies, off their competitors, in order for them to win. And that is how the original race format works, or the standard race format works, with FP1 and 2 on Friday, FP3 and qualifying on Saturday, and the race itself on the Sunday. Now, the only other change to a Grand Prix format is when certain circuits or certain race weekends add a sprint race and adds the sprint format. But we're going to hold on that for now. We'll just put a wee pause on that, and we'll talk about that a wee bit more in depth in the next episode. And that is going to do us for this week's episode of the Bells Club podcast. First, I want to thank you all for listening to this week's episode, and if you enjoyed, please feel free to give us a follow here on wherever you're listening to us, either YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And we'll look forward to speaking to you all next week for round 4 of the F1 World Championship, or we'll take a look at Bahrain on the Bahrain Grand Prix. Goodbye, everybody.